Welcome, everybody, to this exploration of pet rabbit welfare issues, where we will use VetCompass clinical records to try and explore one aspect to try and understand the welfare of this type of animal. Thank you to UFAW for giving me this platform to raise the critically important issue of the welfare of companion animal rabbits. I hope this will begin a whole series of further conversations about how we keep this species as a companion animal, and indeed whether we should keep this species as a companion animal. My name is Dan O'Neill. I was a primary care practitioner for 2 decades before returning to the Royal Veterinary College, where I'm now one of the leaders of the VetCompass program of research. During this presentation, we will explore some aspects of the wider question about companion animal rabbits, and we will ask whether they represent a welfare crisis that's hidden in open sight, but yet we just can't see it. Every welfare question needs some data to answer it. For this, we will explore the VetCompass big data resource. We will look at the results of a specific rabbit study carried out within VetCompass, and then we will consider all this information to draw some conclusions and plan some next steps. So let's start with an exploration of the wider question about companion animals and whether they are a welfare crisis hidden in open sight. Language is really important. I titled this talk with pet rabbits, but the reality is we should be moving away from the language of pet ownership and moving towards the language of animal guardianship. This follows lots of the thoughts of Elliot Katz, where we need to work away from considering our desires to own animals that are seen as cute and fluffy and move more towards meeting the needs of these animals. We should try and safeguard their welfare rather than simply fitting them into our lives. Their welfare is really the priority. And indeed, one could go so far as asking the question whether a rabbit really is suitable as a companion animal species in the first place. Domestication. In one sense, rabbits have been domesticated for maybe 2 centuries. The Romans first used them 2,000 years ago for food and fur. Even in the UK during World War I and World War II, they were used as a food source. But it's really only in the last 150, 200 years that they've been domesticated and kept as pets, and we have started to bring breeds, individual breeds within the species. So we take an animal from the wild, and what's the worst that can happen when we domesticate? Surely their lives get better? Well, not always. Perhaps we take a wild animal and then it spends a life in this wonderful, well cared for environment. The story so far about rabbits. Rabbits are really common in the UK. They're the 3rd most popular UK pet, maybe 1 million rabbits kept here. Traditionally, they're seen as children's pets. And maybe this is where lots of the welfare issues stem from. The rabbit species is a prey animal. These are alert and timid creatures, and they're driven by survival needs, fight or flight. As a result, they do not really make good pets for small children. Rabbits are fragile, they're easily injured, they're easily frightened, they can bite, and they're ground dwellers, whereas children like to pick rabbits up and hold them at standing height. Attitudes are changing though, and over the last number of decades, rabbit ownership has moved towards being owned by adults, and the rabbits being kept as house rabbits rather than often as solo animals in hutches and gardens. As humans, we do need to consider our social license to operate. If we're keeping rabbits as a companion animal species, we need to consider the needs of the rabbits to ensure that our social license is legitimate. When I was considering the wider question about the welfare of companion animals, I could see that this really was a huge topic with many different aspects, and not all of these aspects could be explored in any single study. So this is a topic that needs to be dissected and then the individual components considered. The components that are important are, in the first place, whether rabbits are suitable as a companion animal species at all, and if so, is that suitability more for adults or children? These animals need to be bred, whereas the welfare issues about breeding them as companion animals. And after that, the welfare issues about purchasing them as companion animals. Once they're owned, we have to consider their behavioral needs. These are a prey species with very complex social and survival behaviors. Are we meeting these needs? We need to consider management, the diet, the housing, solo or companions, huge issues. And then we need to consider the health of the species. What health issues do they have? So this is a hugely complex question, and it's really the health issues that we're going to focus on in this presentation. So looking at the health, I'm going to try and answer three components of this. Demography, so breakdowns of breeds and sex ratios. What are the most common disorders and what do they die of? And how long do rabbits live? So most of those answers to these health questions will come as numbers, and numbers needs data, and this is where the VetCompass big data resource is going to come into play. So let's explore what VetCompass is. Essentially, this is a very simple concept. Veterinary practices record clinical data on computer systems. VetCompass extracts certain fields, anonymized fields from these computer systems, and loads them to a single database where researchers work on these data to generate answers to specific research questions, publish these as papers, feed them back to the veterinary practices such that the veterinary professional teams can enhance their clinical activities, enhance animal welfare, get better clinical outcomes. And this is a very positive and necessary circle. However, VetCompass also does something else that's very unique among such research projects, and that is that VetCompass feeds information widely to a range of other stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, the charities, but especially to the general public. After all, it's the general public who own these species, who select which ones to buy, who look after them, who choose to take them to vets, and who finally make decisions about euthanasia. VetCompass in the UK, currently almost every single major veterinary group is sharing data with VetCompass, as well as many, many, many independent veterinary practices. These practices are spread right across the UK, and currently we have over 30% of all UK practices feeding in data every day into VetCompass. Cumulatively, that gives us information on over 15 million UK patients. When we break these down by species, dogs and cats are by far and away the most common, but there are over 750,000 rabbits in the VetCompass database, and it's this species we're going to focus on for the remainder of this presentation. So let's look specifically at the rabbit study and what we can learn from this and how we can use this to enhance our understanding about the welfare issues around companion animal rabbits. This was a paper that was published in 2019 in the Veterinary Record. This was actually one of our earlier studies. If we were doing this again now, and when we repeat similar studies on rabbits, they will be much larger, much more powerful. But even this study is transformative when it comes to the information we have on rabbits, which previously to this was often based on very small studies of tens or hundreds of rabbits. So those days have gone. We're now moving into the big data era. The methods from an epidemiological perspective, these are the most important. We need to see under the hood. For this study, we had 6,349 rabbits from 107 first opinion clinics that were under veterinary care in 2013. We used information on all 6,000 rabbits to report the demography. For the most common disorders, we looked at a subset, a random sample of 2,506 of these rabbits, where we read the entire of the clinical records to pull out information on all disorders recorded. And for the mortality and longevity, we looked at 370 of these rabbits that died during the study period. Demography. Breakdown by sex. Males are more common than females. Well, even that is a surprising result. Why? Maybe males live longer. Maybe the public just prefer having males. Neutering levels were very high in these rabbits, over 70% in both males and females, with no difference between males and females. But we need to remember these were rabbits that were under veterinary care. And indeed, many of them may have just come for veterinary care just for neutering and vaccination. The median age of the rabbits under veterinary care was 3.2 years, with the males slightly older than the females, 3.3 years versus 3.1 years. So this is some hinting at why there were more males than females. And the median adult body weight was 2.1 kilos, with no difference between males and females. So demography is really important because we need to understand what these species looks like. When it comes to common breeds, the most common breeds were the domestic rabbit, just classed as domestic, but we had Lop, Netherland Dwarf, Lionhead, Miniature Lop, Dutch, Dwarf Lop, and Rex. All very common rabbits. These are all rabbits that look very different from the wild rabbit, and these are further examples of how mankind can selectively breed specific types of domestic animals. Among the disorder prevalence, we had 57% of the rabbits had at least one disorder during 2013. And across the range of disorders, we had 192 distinct disorders recognized. The median annual disorder count was 1, and this did not differ between males and females. When we look at the most common disorders that were seen, a lot of these were related to nails, teeth, perineal soiling, bowel problems, and obesity. 7.6% of these rabbits were seen for overgrown molars and 4.3% for overgrown incisors. 4.5% had perineal soiling. This is where fecal material builds up in clumps around the back end. Almost 4% were deemed to be clinically overweight. So these are a very good indication of key health issues in rabbits. Another way of looking at health issues in rabbits is to group them, and this helps us to identify which body systems are most relevant to their health. When we look at it from this perspective, we can see that skin problems, oral problems, bowel problems, eye problems, and parasitic are among the leading issues. But behavioral issues were identified in 5% of rabbits. That in itself is concerning. So we're now starting to use these data to explore the health issues of rabbits. And then finally, mortality and longevity. How long did these rabbits live? Well, the median longevity or average lifespan was 4.3 years, and the males outlived the females by 1.5 years. So perhaps this answers why there are more males than females in the overall population. And it also begs the question, why? What is it about females that causes them to die earlier? When we look at the causes of death, the most common cause of death is fly strike, myiasis, which is a really unpleasant way to die. Anorexia, very general cause. Recumbency, head tilt was very common. Myxomatosis, 5% of rabbits under veterinary care died from myxomatosis. This is a viral disease that's preventable by vaccination. So again, we can start to see some major issues here, a lot of which are related to husbandry. So, some conclusions and further questions. What can we conclude from these results, and where might we go next? Well, from a demographic point of view, we can conclude that males are more common and they live slightly longer, 1.5 years longer. There's no difference in between the sexes in body weight or neutering, and our most common breeds are domestic, a general catch-all group for rabbits, Lop and Netherland Dwarf. And there needs to be some questions asked about the welfare issues of these specific breeds. Have we really selected and developed these breeds with welfare in mind, or are we just selecting them based upon what looks cute? Is it the needs of the rabbit that's the priority, or the needs of the human? On average, the lifespan of rabbits was 4.3 years. Males live longer. Some questions need to be asked here. And fly strike was the top cause of death. Fly strike, a very unpleasant cause of death, and is preventable to a degree. So some questions need to be asked here about the management and the husbandry of these rabbits. And when it comes to most common disorders, nail issues, but also dental, overgrown incisors and molars, perineal soiling, which in itself is an issue, but also leads on to fly strike, and obesity, completely a management-driven issue. So there are some next questions. Obviously, this is exploring just one aspect of rabbit welfare, but a deeper exploration of dental management issues around perineal soiling. We need to explore skull conformation and how does this affect the health and welfare of rabbits. Animal husbandry, how do we keep these rabbits, and is that a welfare issue? And also we need to recognize the power of big data, of VetCompass big data, to answer these questions. At the start, I posed a big question. Are companion animal rabbits a welfare crisis hidden in open sight? What can we conclude? I think we can conclude there is some evidence here that companion animal rabbits are a welfare crisis hidden in open sight. The high levels of death from unpleasant disorders such as fly strike, preventable disorders such as myxomatosis, and the high level of health issues related to dental, related to nails, related to obesity, related to perineal soiling suggest that there are opportunities here to improve animal welfare. In conclusion, I would like to thank the other authors of this study, Hermine Craven, Dave Broadbelt, David Church, and Joe Headley. The full paper is available from the Veterinary Record site, and I would like to thank all the veterinary practices who contribute data and collaborate with VetCompass. Thank you for your attention.